internal migration. So we only have two choices in this regard. We can take America, the lower 48, and essentially divide it into four equal quadrants. Take the Mississippi River, and then take the latitudes around, say, Tennessee, and we divide America in those four equal quadrants. Out of those four quadrants, the northeastern quadrant is going to do the best in the global warming environment. We've got more forest, more clean water, more natural water, larger water supply. Climate is going to be more conducive to human habitation. We also have large acreages of disused farmland. We have a huge amount of land just in the northeastern quadrant of the country, which could absorb the rest of the U.S. population. I mean, it wouldn't be as nice as it is today, but we could essentially take everybody from the other three quarters and put them in the northeastern quadrant, and it would still be quite livable. It would still be quite manageable in terms of the environment. Now, nobody wants to do that. I mean, nobody wants to leave their hometown. I mean, that's just the nature of being human. Let's say you were born in Biloxi, Mississippi. You love Biloxi, Mississippi. If you've never been there, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's just this town down in Mississippi on the Gulf. Great, sounds good. But it's just another name. But if you were born down there, and that's where you grew up, well, that's your world, and that's everything. It's where your parents were, your grandparents were, and so forth. So the natural inclination for humans is to stay put until they absolutely can't stay anymore. So the idea of migrating, three quarters of the U.S. up to the northeastern quadrant is not realistic because people will resist it. Even though it would be in their best benefit, it would be the right thing to do, people would just resist it until the very, very end. Now, the second thing we can do is essentially re-liquefy the West. So how in the world do we do that? Well, we know the planet is 70% water. The distance between the Pacific Ocean and Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the Colorado River, we're talking about something on the order of 700 or 800 miles, depending on exactly what path we take. The federal government already owns the interstate highway system. We already own land adjacent to the interstate highway systems. I have spoken to many very well-educated and knowledgeable and experienced engineers here in Washington, D.C. on this very topic. In fact, we were talking last Sunday in our hiking group about this very topic. It is extremely feasible to essentially pump water from the Pacific Ocean, refill Lake Mead, refill Lake Powell, refill the Colorado River, and to fill every other reservoir and lake in the western part of the United States, including Salt Lake in Utah, which is drastically reduced and will probably go dry in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years unless we do something. We could actually pump enough water, we could desalinate the water, we could turn it into fresh water if necessary, and we can re-greenify the western part of the United States. So for example, if you look at the Nile River in Egypt, Egypt is a desert, okay? But if you look at the area adjacent, the land masses adjacent to the Nile, what you see running through the Egyptian desert is you see a green oasis, a whole green tunnel corridor, if you will, that runs along the Nile. And that's where a large portion of the Egyptian population lives, and it's been like this going all the way back to the age of pharaohs. So that is probably the better solution. And it sounds like it would be expensive, but it would actually be 1,000,000 times cheaper than uprooting 3/4 of the population and moving them to the northeastern corridor. Because like I say, we already own the interstate road system. We already have the easements and the land beside it. We already have the tube technology to move the water. There are new high-strength, nano-constructed tubes that could transport millions upon millions of gallons of water, per hour. I mean, a very, very short space of time. And we could re-liquefy by re-aquifying the western part of the United States. And in the process, what we get is we get better weather patterns. We're going to get cooler climates. We're going to get water for agriculture. We're going to get water watering your lawns, taking your shower 10 times a day. I mean, well, whatever it is you want to do, we eliminate the water shortage problem. And when you start re-terraforming the forest, as it were, as plants begin to grow, as trees begin to grow, we begin to see both the atmosphere and the environment take on healthy characteristics. Now, a really good example of what I'm talking about here is what Israel has done in its own deserts. And it has been doing that over the history of its country. So we're not talking about hypothetical, pie in the sky solutions. We're talking about solutions that have in fact been used and are currently being used on other places on the planet.